played around with some stuff last night. Um, just to give it more life, more credibility. So I'm playing around with a bunch of stuff, and it gave me the opportunity to mess around with a couple of other functions on the software as well as YouTube itself. Um, so just having some fun with it. Let's, I think this is blank. Let's go here. Hopefully there will be no landscaping today. And I did figure out how to do the background noise eliminating stuff. We'll see. So the birds are singing and it's not picking it up. So this should sound better. Um, and that's how we do stuff, right? We learn, we pick something, and we baby step it, and we learn from our mistakes, or we learn from things that happen, right? You're like, oh man, I didn't realize that happened. And so you figure out um how to stop it from happening again, right? And so for me, this is a process. A process. You guys, you have to really understand where I'm coming from on a lot of these things. I've been watching baseball or MLB since I was 2 years old. So it's life. It's life. And so then we had the Tommy Lasorda years, and then the 90s rolled in. Yeah, the background, it's working. Wow. So you guys shouldn't be getting a lot of the background stuff anymore. Apologies that it took me so long to do it. Sorry. But this is a learning process. So I thought that the people involved in MLB were looking out for the sport. We all have things that happen in our life, right? We go to school, and then some of us go to college, and then there's marriage, and then there's children, and then there's raising those children. Like Clint Eastwood said, men and women have very different roles. For a man, you guys, Clint Eastwood's a different case because he spread it around, right? And so for him, he's not a deadbeat dad. He has several children with several different women, but he helps raise those children, and he helps those women not work, right? And so, but Clint Eastwood did acknowledge that men and women have different roles in life. A man is almost like the stud. Is it the stud horse? And then women, we are the ones that end up with raising the kids as far as their daily needs and stuff like that. Obviously, all children need mom and dad, and because it balances out. And I've realized this with my kid too. Like some kids, he's self-motivated, but there are things that I have to remind him about. And if I'm always the one reminding him about them, then he's going to start developing a little, because I'm a woman, he might start developing ill feelings toward women who nag or whatever, right? And that's why there's the balance. There's the balance between mom and dad. And even we have to acknowledge that even then there's not always the ideal balance. So it's a constant thing, right? And so for me, um I went through my own life milestones, and I always thought that MLB would be there as something to pass the time, something to for entertainment, and then I come to find out that that is not the case. It's been infiltrated, much like every other American institution, and here we are, me sharing stuff about it. So I am drawing on past experiences. I know the stuff happening within MLB, and I'm drawing on those experiences, especially the knowledge that I've gained over the last since about 2017. Um, since around 2017, and so I'm just sharing my knowledge, sharing what I've learned, uh, just sharing, adding a different perspective, a project that I definitely want to work on as an exercise with some of you guys out there. Scott Greer, Ramsey Paul. I don't know about others. Preference is those not engaging in drug use. I understand the alcohol consumption, but let's not get into you should be in AA territory. Um, it would be nice to find other people who don't have complexes. I personally, if I know someone's complex, like they're short or they don't like the push-up guys or whatever, um, it's tough to take their stuff at face value. We really need to find people uh, who can put their complexes to the side and are guided by them. Like I draw on my experiences, but I'm not guided by them. I've always had a love for American history. I noticed stuff was going sideways. As soon as Barack Obama started campaigning, I was like, something is just doesn't feel right. Something feels different. Before I dive into today, I want to bring in some stuff. So we all know that one of the reasons why prices are sky high and the dollar is worth far, far less is because of inflation. But it's not normal inflation that you can expect, right? Like, maybe bread goes up a penny every year, right? Maybe it goes up a penny every year. Or, um, I mean, it wasn't that long ago when I could fill up my 12-gallon gas tank with $20. There were times where I could fill it up with 18. It wasn't that long ago. And so inflation obviously has made the dollar less valuable. It's obviously decreased America's influence and power around the world, not as an authoritarian figure, but as the beacon of freedom across the world, right? And it's accelerated over the last decade, right? You would say the decade. I don't think inflation really took off during the Barack Obama administration. I feel like it took off. Well, actually, that's not true. It did take off during Barack Obama. I've got all the timelines are in my head. So yeah, it because Barack Obama was 2008, 2000. Ah, it was Barack Obama. Apologies for that. Um, so yeah, it was Barack Obama. I wanted to say something else, but no, it's Barack Obama. And in some cases we could say George Bush too, right? I can tell you that when I was in college, this isn't super relevant, but the beginnings of all of this were definitely sown in the time when I was in college. And but it wasn't as pronounced as it is today. So we could argue that Trump helped put a band-aid on inflation too, right? And then obviously the Biden administration is just trying to continue whatever was started during the Barack Obama administration. But criminal accounting. Criminal accounting. Let's talk a little bit about criminal accounting. So, and shout out to Zero Hedge. He retweets. They are retweeting a lot more stuff from other people as opposed to only posting their stuff. It's probably because they get thousands on thousands of views, and so maybe they're spreading the wealth at this point to other people. But it's all relevant to their niche. So last night, Zero Hedge retweeted John Hold. Brad Huston. Sounds like a fan account. Is that what you guys call it? So Yellen just said that unrealized capital gains is income. Let that sink in. Unrealized gains is income. So let's bring in MLB into this. MLB participates in criminal accounting. That's why apparently these so-called teams are worth supposedly billions of dollars. And this is, I believe this was published LA Times, Mike DiGiovanna, 2020. Okay, so I believe that this information is based on the 2019 tax return. And so you've got, obviously, we understand that the Yankees, ever since Babe Ruth established, put them on the map, obviously, the Yankees have been accruing value since 1923. So it makes sense that they are the most valuable team, the most valuable brand in American baseball, picked up by MLB, right? So you've got the Yankees at 5 billion. And I did sort at one point by value, but this one I gave you in alphabetical order. No other team comes close, right? What are the Tampa Dodgers at? Yeah, the Tampa Dodgers didn't even make 2, right? Okay, the Chicago Cubs at 3 billion is criminal accounting at its best. That is just nonsense. No way are they worth 3 billion. So the precursor to the Tampa Dodgers was the Chicago Cubs. They've got a lot of the same guys in there. Some of them, they're all the same tribe, right? The tribe got its start with the original Tampa team, which isn't a baseball team. Well, it's an MLB team. It's not a baseball team. They are just they're the science experiment. They are the what's it called? They're the minor league team at the major league level. They are the training ground. That's where these guys go through it. Do they accept the analytics? Do they accept the cash that comes with not being a baseball player, but getting to wear an MLB uniform as a career? So that's a lot of criminal accounting. The Chicago Cubs worth $3 billion is, apologies, but it's fucking nonsense. Nonsense. No way. So the Chicago team has a lot of real estate holdings that they can keep away from the baseball players if the baseball players ever change their the foundations of their negotiations with MLB. That all that real estate holdings will not go into. See, at that time, all those real estate holdings won't be put into the pot. Lots of shady stuff going on in MLB. Okay. Um, okay, so how do we get to these kinds of valuations for a team with all this bureaucracy? This is the Tampa Dodgers in the shortened asterisk 2020 season. And so I couldn't even fit in everything. I just kind of jumbled it up on the last column in the corner. But yes, it's true. Some of these positions are like the ones that work 81 times a year, a few hours each time. So they listed everybody and their mom. Um, but so let's, but still, this, this is far more than this ever was, right? Far more. Like the guys who tell Mookie Betts when to run, or Justin Turner when to swing, or Joe Kelly what pitch to pitch, as Bob Guerin sits next to Dave Roberts, and I do know uh, Bob Guerin's pre Tampa Dodgers work. That's why I say Bob Guerin. Okay. Okay, so criminal accounting. Criminal accounting. So MLB counts debt as income. Debt as income, which is criminal accounting. We don't do that, right? We don't do that. In 1912, it was, as far as American baseball was concerned, it was just expenses and assets, or receipts from the gate and all your expenses. Simple accounting, simple math, right? Especially because in 1912 there was no tax code yet, right? So a lot of stuff, that's what I'm saying. There's so much opportunity to do something, to pick something and run with it, as opposed to playing video games and smoking pot. There is so much opportunity. I understand that most people fall into the flock. They need some sort of guidance, but there's no reason for so many guys to be playing video games, smoking pot, and thinking that they're going to rule the world through the internet in 10 years. It's the battle, whatever, however you want to describe it, it takes place. It's going to keep taking place in real life. The internet complements it. I mean, I can argue that the internet is a globalist tool, as you found out yesterday. People only went beyond their birthplace. They only traveled 2 to 3 miles out per generation. There was no globalism. There was no globalism in the founding of America either. Yes, Lewis and Clark, Louisiana Purchase, Manifest Destiny, but America is shaped in a wonderful way where you've got oceans on two sides, and then you got Canada, right? And then you've got Mexico. And we can all be friends. We can all be friends. Not NAFTA friends, but we can all be friends. And I do want to bring in something about California. After I get through my criminal accounting stuff. So why are these MLB teams valued in the billions and millions? Well, first of all, they count debt as income, which is ludicrous. No, your debt is not income. Your debt is your debt. You owe it. You subtract your debt from your income, And then whatever you hope you're left with something after that, right? That's your disposable income. Well, okay, not technically because you still have your expenses, right? Okay. So on top of counting debt as income, now Yellen, the Fed, is telling us that they can count unrealized capital gains as income too. What the fuck? What the fuck? And no, this isn't me. I think those of you that got into Bitcoin right off the ground when it was worth like 2 cents, and if you're still holding, I think that's wonderful. However, what happens when the lights go out? What happens if you can't cash out before the electricity turns off for whatever reason in an emergency, right? How do you cash out given that credit cards don't work when the lights go out either? We've got to have hard liquid assets too, right? And yes, the dollar can become worthless too, but I've thought of some stuff. When we build a town, when we build the hypothetical town, I want to talk about that too. And obviously, I don't know how much of that we should do online. We can sniff out the FBI informants among us. That shouldn't be a big deal. We can do this. We can do a think tank offline, and we can sniff out the FBI informants. I'm pretty confident we'll be okay. So, unrealized capital gains. What is that? Well, I happen to know what it is because MLB used this argument in their asterisk shortened 2020 season. So, MLB was coming from a perspective of if they had played the 2020 season in its entirety, they were estimating how much income they were going to garner. And so when the season only lasted 60 games, they only played half, right? I personally thought that they were going to be playing by Memorial Day. And there was enough of a window for them to get that done. I think, again, MLB is just so shady, rotten, so rotten, so such a cesspool that they pushed it out until when did they actually start? After 4th of July, right? They started after 4th of July. Okay, nonetheless, what they did, and that's why if Mike DiGiovanna is updating his story, that's going to be very interesting because not only do they count debt as income, but they're going to insert unrealized capital gains. And that just, again, MLB said, when all of this was going on last year, they were saying, if they were forecasting, estimating that if they played the entire 2020 season as scheduled, as is, without interruption, they were estimating how much income they were going to earn. That didn't happen. So then you end up with the actual income realized from the shortened season, which was something because games were televised, the so-called postseason was played, all that stuff, right? So they garnered some income, but it wasn't the full potential had the entire season been played. So to them, they get to claim and use against the players the unrealized capital gains. So actual income earned based on the shortened season subtracted from their estimates had the full season been played. That is straight up criminal accounting. That's why if Mike DiGiovanna updated his story, it would be super interesting to see how the valuations and the net worth of the principal owners would have changed. So I am doing my best to explain this in a manner that makes sense to people. people. I'm using MLB as the example because it's what I know. It's my niche. It's my area. It's not my area. I'm not going to call it my area of expertise, but it's definitely maybe one day. I have a long way to go, but it's definitely my niche, my area of knowledge at this time. So Yellen just said that unrealized capital gains is income. Fake money, fake money, made up money, made up income, pie in the sky income, income that someone said this is how much we should earn on a spreadsheet is now going to be or should be considered income. No, and from her perspective, unrealized capital gains is income. So that could mean that there are already corporations engaging in this behavior. This could mean that there are hedge funds already engaging in this behavior. It's up to somebody out there. Pick your favorite company and read over their annual reports. Just pick a company and read. Again, so much opportunity. One of you video game guys, pick your favorite company and start going over their annual reports. Nobody needs to pick more than one company, right? And let's not all pick the same. So shout out to Zero Hedge for retweeting that. Totally. So a lot of criminal accounting happening or around. So what does this do? These people holding 32% of the top 1%, holding 32% of hold. I do want to get the vocabulary. Net worth. Okay, net worth, household net worth. So you've got I don't have a problem with the top 1% holding 32.1% of the household net worth. I don't have a problem with that. My issue is that it's coming from criminal accounting, right? And it's coming from inflation, engineering. Again, it's just criminal accounting nonsense. And like the lady in the subway, the one that was tearing down the ads, toward the end of the video, she said, this isn't going to stop until Americans say no more. It's up to people to say, nah, no. The colonists did it. England was technically within their right to say, you know what? We've spent this much protecting you guys against the Indians or the natives, against the French. I don't think the Spaniards were that much of a problem. But the French, definitely the the Indians that were scalping them, right? Apparently they were scalping all the way into Iowa. That's my understanding from that video clip for Honus Wagner that someone tweeted out, I think on the anniversary of his birthday. So England was within its right to tell the colonists, we have this debt. We've used some of that debt to help protect you. We need you guys to pay it back, help pay it back. And the colonists were like, nah, you're not going to do that. So let's continue on the American pageant. If you have a copy of the book, I'm on page 107. Again, this is the 9th edition, published in 1990 something. Let me 91. And yes, when I was taking advanced placement American history, it was not 1991. It was after 91. But I also think it took them a while to publish a new edition. And look, American history doesn't change. Uh, you don't need a new textbook every year. I mean, sure, you want to add current events, but you're living current events. So I would, I mean, if you're sound minded, you can rely on on some of your experience, especially if you're someone who's like, okay, well, that's what this side was saying, and this is what was happening here. Um, but yeah. So again, England was within its right to tax the colonists to pay some of its debt because they used some of their money to defend the colonists against the Indians that were scalping them. Because the Indians put up a fight. That's how it is. If you're involved in a scuffle of this magnitude, war isn't polite, right? Shit happens. Stuff happens. And so stuff happens. And okay, so the stamp tax uproar shortly after the 7 Years' War. Prime Minister George Grenville, an honest and able financier not noted for tact, moved vigorously. Dedicated to efficiency, he aroused the resentment of the colonials in 1763 by ordering the British Navy to enforce the navigation laws. And so, again, there was mercantilism, navigation law. A lot of it was just tax stuff, right? A lot of tax stuff. And Mr. Grenville did a lot of other things too. The Sugar Act of 1764. Then came the Quartering Act of 1765. Here we go. Then 1765 was the stamp tax. So let me read again some more stuff just so it makes more sense as opposed to me just summarizing. Let's just start from dedicated to efficiency, he aroused the resentment of the colonials in 1763 by ordering the British Navy to enforce the navigation laws. He also secured from Parliament the so-called Sugar Act of 1764, the first law ever passed by that body for raising revenue in the colonies for the crown. Super important. Whenever something takes place for the first time, it's very, very important because it sets the precedent. Right? That's it. Super, super important. That's a lot of what I've done. When was the word racism used for the first time on American soil? What was the first use of Judeo-Christianism or Judeo-Christian values? When was that phrase first uttered, right? And then as far as American baseball goes, I was like, okay, platooning. When was platooning first used? And it does go back to the Ty Cobb era. One of his buddies did it for his team, and I haven't had the opportunity to look up who it was, but I believe he was managing at that point. So you want to know, right? When was the first time the Supreme Court ruled on interstate commerce transactions, right? When did the Supreme Court believe it could rule on whether public schools could participate in prayer and Bible study? I'm going to argue that the Supreme Court did not have the jurisdiction to rule on that. But why did it happen? Because this is post World War II. This is the sexual revolution. A lot of stuff was going on. Um, lot of stuff, right? And so ask yourselves on some of these things, when was the first time that this occurred? Or what's the precedent? What's the origin of it? And we don't have to go as far back as the origin of man or the origin of religion, but we can go far enough back until we get. I mean, if you want to get that literal, go for it. I think we've got a little bit more of a sense of urgency happening. I mean, I feel it. I feel that we need to have a sense of urgency. So that's my perspective and where I stand. And let me throw in the California stuff right now because I might forget later on. So there's been some discussion due to the recall. What happened to California? California used to be red. And a lot of people will pull out their pictures of California in the 1950s and the 1960s, and I totally get it. I do want to point out that the way that the US, America, acquired California, you can't be terribly upset over Mexicans running around in the state in the sense that they were already here. You weren't going to clean shop 100%, right? I mean, when America thought about taking over Mexico too, they had to figure out what they were going to do with the people living there, right? And they did not have the heart to kick everyone out. Life would be different. Life would totally be different if they had. Who knows what things would look like right now, right? It would have been interesting though, for sure. I'm just saying that you can't be shocked that there's Mexicans running around California, because nobody officially kicked everyone out. And then, I mean, I haven't had the opportunity to look it up, but when was the border officially established? Then you get, I think what really set things sideways was the law from 1965. What's it called? I can't remember, but I know you guys know. That's is it post JFK or during JFK, right? So business was being conducted as it was. These laws cause bureaucracy. And once you get into bureaucracy, that's when shit goes sideways, right? So Mexicans were crossing over the border between Mexico and California before that, the Immigration Act of 1965, something like that, right? The border wasn't established yet. So they would cross over to work and then they would go back home. I'm all in for that. In the 1970s, there were contracts. I'm all in for that too. You come over and work and then you go back home. I think we can make that work. Now, I'm going to say something, and I'm going to get one, if this ever gets around, I'm going to get a lot of hate. The last great governor of California was Pete Wilson. That was the last time California ran well. It was under Pete Wilson. And then you've got Proposition 108, which was overturned. I think that's when shit really went sideways in California. Now, what happened to California? Well, we've got to look at Prop 108. Who helped overturn Prop 108? That's going to give us the insight that we need to say, because I have ideas on who helped overturn that. Obviously, it wasn't Americans. I'm not even sure it was Mexicans. But we know, for example, the Catholic Charities, which we should question their Catholicism. Maybe they had something to do with it. If you know my opinions, you know whom else I believe could have helped been involved in overturning that. Okay, I didn't even know until recently Dianne Feinstein, she's not an American. So why does she and her husband get away with so much criminal activity, financial criminal activity? Well, right? She's not an American. Not an American. Not an American. So that's why with when it comes to like Alex Jones, a man who has a microphone that spans the country and he refuses to acknowledge the source of so many problems on American soil, I'm suspicious and I move on from that. I'm like, you know what? It's cruel to keep Americans in a state of continually chasing their own tail in this cycle. It's cruel. The sources of America's issues are in our faces, but as long as people refuse to acknowledge them, they are not going to be part of the solution. That's my problem with Alex Jones. Not, I mean, I also think that we need to find people. I go back to the Rudy Giuliani example. He did so many wonderful things for New York City. We all know this. I mean, I watched Sex and the City. They make references to him, just like so many shows. The Fresh Prince of Bel Air, Home Alone made references to Trump before Trump ran. Right? They loved Trump. Um, Giuliani maybe wasn't loved because he ruled with a hammer in New York City, but he reduced crime. Right? The problem is that we've got to say thank you so much for everything you've done, but it's just the amount of baggage that these people have. It's too much. We can't. We're too busy defending them. We can't keep pushing forward. And again, this isn't a slight against Giuliani. It's not a slight against Alex Jones, but we have to say, hey man, awesome work, but we've got to keep moving forward. We've got to acknowledge the sources of problems on American soil, and they're they're difficult. They are, and I understand that people have friends. I remember there was a stream with Six. He was saying, "What are you gonna do? You're gonna deport everybody? People have friends," and he's right. People have friends, but we need to also say that's why I believe in the last in, first out. I think that's a logical, fair. Scott Adams doesn't like the word fair. Okay, but whatever. It's logical, right? Uh, what last in, first out. I think that's doable. That would fix Minnesota, right? Because Minnesota in 2021 is a result of Barack Obama. That's not too far go. And then maybe we wait to see if the self correction. I watched Ramsey's mini stream last night. The self correction takes place in a lot of different areas. People say, you know what? There's no more free stuff. Let's get out of here, or whatever the case is, right? You do hope for some self correction. Do I think there's going to be self correction in MLB? I don't think so because it they don't resemble American baseball. They are MLB. Like, could some self correction take place there? Maybe, but I don't. It wouldn't be enough for me. Like, I know there's this wonderful video that some total left wing Trump hater tweeted out, but it's such a great video. I had to retweet it. But that's why I tweeted out the video itself without the retweet. But it's like, again, American stuff was different back then. This is 1947. The Yankees hosted Old Timers Day. So I know of Old Timers Day when it's just your team. Like the LA Dodgers had a history of hosting Old Timers Day, but it was like, come see all the guys from the 80s. So it was only Dodgers. This Old Timers Day in 1947 at Yankee Stadium brought in all the old timers. Um, Cy Young, obviously Babe Ruth, George Sisler, Jimmy Fox, Frankie Crosetti. Oh, I'm not Italian. That's Italian, right? I guess I'm not Italian. I apologize. Tris Speaker, Ty Cobb, Al Simmons, Mickey Cochran, Nat LaJoy, Home Run Baker, bunch of Hall of Famers from the American baseball era. And that is amazing that they hosted all the old timers. It wasn't them just hosting like New York Yankee old timers. That's awesome. Sorry, I do. I still love baseball. My first love. Uh so okay, so I need to start reeling myself back. And on Friday I am going to talk about Tom Brady. FYI, huge game. That's going to be okay, so obviously they're in season for this new Tom Brady versus Belichick game, right? So obviously it counts, but I'm imagining that it's gonna be like the game that took place in Boston for Cy Young Day, where it didn't count. That game didn't count because it was honoring Cy Young. But I almost feel like this game, it's gonna be played, but there's going to be more just Tom Brady is going to get his homecoming. That's going to be a homecoming. Those New England fans still love him. It's like they were married for 20 years. And I've said before, some couples don't divorce simply because they're so used to each other. And I think New England fans have that for Tom Brady. They still love him. And I'm going to talk more about that on Friday. Okay, so I need to start reeling my way back. So I got off on this tangent because I was talking about the sources of American problems because I was talking about California. The last great governor of California was Pete Wilson. And then we had Prop 108, and then it got overturned. Who overturned it? I'll do my part, but if other people already know, obviously the information is much appreciated. I will tell you an experience that I had regarding Pete Wilson. So because of the aptitude and the things that I did when I was in high school, I had the opportunity to travel and to meet a lot of different people and to have experiences that I'm sure they hoped I would use for the others, for the left, not the right. But it is what it is, right? And so we had the opportunity to go to Sacramento, and we were in a group, and it was a couple of us, and we were in the building, and look, I think we were all Mexican. And we told the representative who was hosting us, who was hardcore Mexican, possibly matcha, that you guys, it's basically the Mexican version of, you know. I don't want to say it, but I think you guys understand. If you know of that group, you know what I'm saying. I just I don't want to phrase it. I don't know how to phrase it without saying, because we all know, I mean, we're starting to get there, right? If you know the origin of the word racism on American soil, then you begin to understand that all this KKK symbolism is just theater, right? It's theater. It's theater. And so I don't know how to say this, describe this Mexican group without using a different description, because I know, again, I know that all of this symbolism, this KKK stuff, it's just theater at this point. There's just nothing behind it. Okay, nonetheless, the representative who was hosting us was total, like, Mexican. And so we told her, we're in the building, and we were like, dude, we want to see Pete Wilson. And she looked at us in horror, like, these kids want to meet what she probably described as the white devil, right? Uh, and for us, a bunch of teenagers, well, he's the governor. Yeah, we want to meet the governor, right? And I don't know if he was around when we were there, but she took us to meet. It must have been like the equivalent of the minority whip. So, right, Pete Wilson, Republican. Republicans probably had ruled, therefore the Democrat Party was like, they had the minority whip representative, and she took us to meet that guy instead. I don't remember the name, but lots of experiences, lots of perspective. I'm character ethic as opposed to personality ethic. I have a lot of substance. But again, as a woman, I know my role in life, and also there were things. Oh, it's not getting the background noise. Right on. I figured it out. Um so I I held back a little bit, and then I had an experience in college that I still want to. I'm waiting a little bit longer to talk about, but it changed my life. I went into a tailspin, and then just my own personality. Um, I wasn't going to be happy with a dude that I could boss around. So that didn't help. And then there's, you know, there's a guy, a man can balance it. You know, you don't have to be a wimp. It's not one extreme or the other. You don't have to be a wimp or an asshole, right? There is a balance, and many white men, every group has their sound-minded men who can balance, who don't need to go to one extreme or the other. You don't have to. It's not be a wimp or be an asshole, right? There is a balance, and so that did not help. It didn't help, and so and then on top of finding out the whole outlier stuff, it actually helped me understand myself a little bit more. But it was just, it again, just this, a lot of things just ended up throwing me into a tailspin in my 20s, and that's why I don't want girls to look up to me at I you don't want to be like me. There are other examples of women who have done it better, and I would prefer that they go in that direction, because you've got to be okay with a lot of things if you want this specific route. And it's not for everybody. It's it's I don't even think it's for anybody. So okay. So let's go back a little bit. So Alex Jones, he knows the source. He doesn't want to talk about it. Okay, fine. Don't. We will. What happened to California? The last great governor that we had was Pete Wilson. We had Prop 108. It got overturned. Who overturned it? That will give us a lot of answers. Why does Dianne Feinstein and her husband get away with so much financial criminal activity? She's not an American. Now, I'm not sure if Dianne Feinstein is no longer an American through birth or through her husband. So that would explain a lot of things too. Okay. So California. If you want to know what happened to California, let's backtrack to the Pete Wilson era. Let's find out who specifically helped overturn Prop 108, and then we get a lot of stuff. We get a lot into it. So now let's go back into American history. Let me set the scene again. England had tons of debt because they were in a pissing war with France. A lot of stuff going on, right? It amounted to 140 million pounds in debt. And a significant portion of that had been incurred defending its colonies. Okay. So they're like, hey man, pay the piper. So their taxes got raised. We had the Sugar Act of 1764, the Quartering Act of 1765, and the Stamp Act of 1760. That's 1765 also. Okay, so let's move on. Let's move forward. Grenville regarded all these measures as reasonable and just. He was simply asking the Americans to pay their fair share for colonial defense through taxes that were already familiar in England. In fact, Englishmen for 2 generations had endured a stamp tax far heavier than passed for the colonies, which I don't know if that's true, but okay. Yet the Americans were angrily aroused at what they regarded as Grenville's fiscal aggression. And again, the Englishman who stayed in England was far different from the Englishman who made the trek to America. That's why Americans are culturally who they are. Winning, freedom, individuality, what else? Everything. That's why the American spirit is different. Even though your origin is England for the most part, you're different because the adventurous said, I'm out of here. Let's brave these seas, New England winters, bears, the Wild Wild West, pneumonia. It's a different man, right? Cowboys, and so when I was in Europe, again, I look Spanish and I speak Spanish, so I got away with speaking with different Europeans in Spanish. They made assumptions. I wasn't going to correct them because I don't want, I was like, hey man, I'm hanging out. And so they were friendlier to me, So I had classmates one in particular from Germany who enjoyed picking on Americans. He used to say, oh, you Americans, You wear socks with your sandals, and you wear white socks when you have suits on. So that's the kind of jostling that they used to fling toward the direction of the Americans. And but it was all in. I took it in good fun. Like, uh, it was just it was a different experience for as a college student, and so it shaped. Wait till I tell you guys the story of when I came back. So I experienced reverse culture shock. It's real. And I experienced it right away, and that just added to everything because if I was an outlier before, I was definitely an outlier afterwards. And it was, I experienced very real reverse culture shock. And, but hopefully some of y'all will gain perspective and pick up on the experiences and do something with them. That's what I can hope for. Okay, so the colonists were like, nah, we reject your authoritarianism on us with your taxation without representation stuff. Okay, so the new laws pinched their pocketbooks and even more ominously menaced the local liberties they had come to assume as a matter of right. The American is different from the Englishman, even back then. Thus, some colonial assemblies defiantly refused to comply with the Quartering Act. Super important, super important. Or voted only a fraction of the supplies that it called for. Worse still, Grenville's noxious legislation seemed to jeopardize the basic rights of colonists as Englishmen. Both the Sugar Act and the Stamp Act provided for trying offenders into the hated Admiralty courts where juries were not allowed. There are Americans who have apparently been jailed for 7 months. Americans have the right to legal representation, trial by jury, no excessive fines, no excessive jailings. 7 months. 7 months. Or, right, going on 7 months. So let me repeat. Both the Sugar Act and the Stamp Act provided for trying offenders in the hated Admiralty courts where juries were not allowed. The burden of proof was on the defendants, who were assumed guilty unless they could prove themselves innocent. Ever since, how do I say this? I mean, you guys get this, right? Like, just this paragraph alone. No innocent till proven guilty, excessive fines, trial by jury, jury of your peers, lots of stuff, right? Trial by jury and the doctrine of innocent until proved guilty were ancient privileges that the English people everywhere, including the American colonials, held most dear. And why was a British army needed at all in the colonies now that the French were expelled from the continent and Pontiac's warriors crushed the scalping Indians? The native Indians were not innocent in any of this stuff. Could its real purpose be to whip rebellious colonials themselves into line? Again, I kind of think we are more rebel than patriots at this point. We're rebels, man. Rebel. Many Americans began to sniff the strong scent of a conspiracy to strip them of their historic liberties. They lashed back violently, and the Stamp Act became a target that drew their most ferocious fire. Angry throats raised the cry, no taxation without representation. There was some irony in the slogan because the seaports and tidewater towns that were most wrathful against the Stamp Act had long denied full representation to their own backcountry pioneers. Well, okay. We'll figure it out, right? We'll figure it out. It'll be fine. But now the agitated colonials took the high ground. And so this is where you get like, because, a textbook like this has several authors, right? And so you get people's opinions as they tell you the facts of history. So we always have to be able to separate the two. And so how many Americans know just this tiny sliver of American history? If they knew, okay, how do I say this? So, I mean, when I was growing up, in classes, we didn't discuss freedom of speech. It wasn't, our teachers just taught us. I can think back, and in high school, there was definitely a hippie who taught world history. And there was another history teacher who, God, I don't know anymore. I always thought he looked German, but maybe he was Jewish. And I'm trying to remember where he added the emphasis. There was some emphasis on some stuff. Something that I remember was he told us, when the first man put a fence around his property, it was downhill from there. So I'm trying to figure out his bias based on some of the things that I remember him saying. He called us, and look, rightfully, he said that we came from the working poor. And it's true, right? Like, the middle class was already dwindling. You made just enough money to, like, buy stuff and pay everything. And I don't find that offensive at all. Like, people are so sensitive in 2021 that you can't handle conversations. I don't know anymore. I always thought he was German, but maybe he wasn't. I don't know. But nonetheless, my point is that our teachers didn't encourage us to go protest. And the hippie one probably got the closest to that. But our teachers didn't influence us the way teachers influence kids in 2021. Our teachers were definitely not mentally ill. There were some, out of my graduating class was, how many was it? Maybe like 200 or so. But there's attrition, right? So maybe the freshman classes used to start with 500. So what, you figure a campus of almost 2,000 students, give or take, and so you need a staff for that many bodies. And so there were some homosexuals, and I believe there was one who did the trans thing, but they never told us, and we never saw it. So it was definitely a different time compared to what's going on right now to these kids. So when I hear young males say censorship is okay, it is very strange. And I wonder, okay, how did we get to that? How does a young male say censorship is okay, right? This guy's supposed to be an alpha. This guy is supposed to be a dad one day. Like, who is he going to marry? Is he going to marry a woman that's going to bully him? So it's weird. And then I believe it was Paul Joseph Watson who tweeted out a video. Somebody caught a video of a college age young male, possibly in England, defending or crying about climate change. And the tweet was, "This is what happens when you have too much time on your hands." And that's why college, I don't believe, is healthy for young men in 2021. I think it turns you into bitches as opposed to turning you into men. I'm trying to find the page. I came across it the other day when all the colleges were settled. So Columbia is one of the old ones. Harvard's the oldest college, right? But we know that Harvard was a school for men, for young men, and it was more of a seminary type of thing, right? As opposed to what it is definitely in 2021. I don't remember. This is such a great resource. You can find it online if you get lucky and you go to, a great place to shop for books is like Goodwill and stuff, because those books are basically even the Salvation Army, I think, is another good one. And I personally shop the libraries for books, because these are books that you buy them for $1 and then you end up here we go. You end up books get passed down, right? I mean, obviously if you collect your first editions and whatnot, like my first edition of Cy Young's biography was obviously a library book before, so it's the value in the sense of it's not pristine, right? But I don't treat it that way. I'm glad. I was not finding a lot of Cy Young stuff, so I'm really glad I came across it. And then on top of that, the people who sold it to me gave me a discount, so it was awesome. It was meant to be, maybe. I was meant to be the next owner of that book, maybe. So Harvard was established in 1636, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Denomination congregational. And then Columbia was King's College, New York, New York, 1754, and it was Anglican. Right? So we know this, right? The purpose of college when it was first established is a lot different than what they're used for in 2021. And Columbia definitely went wrong. So I believe that college damages young men more than it helps them. And again, the college guys that MLB recruits are like, okay, so Vanderbilt, MLB has been heavily involved in influencing Vanderbilt's baseball program. And when you look at the guys, Vanderbilt, right? Black and gold uniforms. So MLB has worked several years to influence that specific baseball program. They have money. The program itself is able to self-fund. So obviously MLB saw it as an opportunity because obviously they were only producing white baseball players. So obviously MLB's like, you got to diversity it. But what happens with these baseball programs that MLB has influence over is they only recruit the ones that have undergone the Marxist brainwashing, for lack of a better term. So you get Walker Bueller. And I'm not criticizing Walker Bueller's background. I think it's wonderful. Your job, our job, my job as a parent is to give my kid a good start. Asian families do it the best. I worked for for a while for he may have been he was Asian. Two Asian men. Um we they hired a group of us. We were young because they wanted us to run their business for them. They wanted our youthful enthusiasm, right? And because the business was geared toward other young people, the crew, we were running the business for them, and it was geared toward our age group. So they wanted people in that age group running it. And the reason why he was so successful, first of all, he was intelligent, both of them. And but Asian families give their kids a good start. And I don't care, you know, the victim people are going to come out of the woodwork on this kind of comment and say, well, low income, you can figure it out. If you can't figure it out, it's more of an IQ thing as opposed to an income thing. And that's probably the thing that people don't want to face. Nobody wants to hear that they aren't intelligent enough to pave their own path. Nobody wants to hear that, right? So we have to figure out how to get over that kind of hump. But so regardless of your income status or income level, as a parent, your job is to help your kids get a good start. And that is a system that was working in America. And again, post World War II, you get these internships. And I encourage you guys, again, what's the origin of the internship on American soil? Like, when you start looking up this kind of thing, trust me, it puts things into perspective. It helps a lot. Again, so during the founding of the country, all of these men who signed the Declaration of Independence, for example, so Samuel Adams was second cousin to John Adams. Sam was a merchant, church deacon, and he had a Puritan virtue. I talked about Josiah Bartlett yesterday. He began practicing medicine at age 21, and he became his town's doctor. Carter Braxton, merchant, trade, plantation owner. His grandfather owned a lot of land also. Charles of Carlton, Irish, so, English, Irish landowner. So Carlton was among those who made the effort to return the slaves back to Africa. He was a part of the American Colonization Society, State Colonization Society of Maryland. Carlton was one of the ones who made the effort to send the slaves back. Samuel Chase studied law under John Hall. He was homeschooled. He opened up his own private law practice. And this is what I'm saying. So Samuel Chase is a good example. So Samuel Chase became a lawyer, opened up his own private practice, but he studied under a veteran lawyer. None of this, go to Harvard, go to Yale 2021, go woke, be influenced by a bunch of Marxists, be attacked because you're white. That stuff didn't go down before. I'm going to say that this kind of practice carried all the way through pre-World War II. Let's go pre-World War I, because in the 1940s, Cy Young was worried about what was happening to young men. So you could already see there must have been some sort of disruption in American life. The goal was to keep young men out of jail. So something was already happening. And again, I'm pretty sure it has a lot to do with the change in the economy. It went from majority agriculture, manufacturing, to finance, real estate investing, government, services, communications, a lot of nerd careers, as opposed to what built the country. Now, yes, okay, Samuel Chase was a lawyer. Josiah Bartlett was a doctor, but these are still, how many doctors and lawyers does one town need? Is what, you need them to keep the peace or to keep order, but you don't need a lot either, right? You need a few, not a slew of them. And more importantly, why was America so not bureaucracy in those days? Well, your family's reputation determined your children's future. So if mom divorced dad, that reflected badly on the family, right? If your daughter was whoring herself around, no young man worth, you know, you weren't going to successfully marry her off to a nice young man, right? Okay, some people are going to argue, well, young men could whore themselves out. Maybe, but the families had more control over this stuff in those, right? It was different. There was no OnlyFans, and there was no video games, pot smoking guys, right? Different. So a lot of cool stuff to explore, I think. And the more we explore it and the more we go in these directions, I think a lot of stuff starts to get fixed. I don't know how many small towns in America need help, but to me, it sounds like there's enough small towns to go around. There is an opportunity for everybody that wants it. So tomorrow we will dig into like the Boston Massacre, all the stuff that came after the colonists rebelling against the taxes. Yeah, so we've got the Boston Massacre, the intolerable acts, obviously the Tea Parties, the Continental Congress and bloodshed. It wasn't pretty, you guys. You know this, right? It wasn't pretty. Then you've got, Thomas Paine preaches common sense. Then you've got the separation, right? The patriots and the loyalists. Jefferson explains independence, the loyalist exodus. Again, that's why, to me, American baseball history and American baseball, they do intersect. And in my case, it offers me a way to explain some stuff with examples. Again, maybe, I know it was a little bit different Babe Ruth still went through the Depression, but Ty Cobb, Cy Young, Cap Anson, these guys are products of everything Americans did from the point that they landed, the Pilgrims landing, through the beginning of World War I. we need to uh, we need to de-bitchify young men. We need to get you guys off the video games, off the drugs. We need to let you know that there are opportunities. I guess somebody said this, that young men need hope. Okay, so we've got to guide them in that direction. One thing, so I'm already hour and a half in. You're still watching, thank you. So okay. What, so Americans are individualists. Yes. On a personal level, I don't trust nationalizing a movement on the right. I'm going to tell you right now, since I know that the Libertarian Party is something that came out of Jews or something that Jews put together, I am not putting any faith in people who identify that way. Because it's just going to be a matter of time before they say Auschwitz or the Holocaust, and then the movement stops dead in its tracks. You know, the people who were doing the Tea Party movement, that was a lot of people whose enthusiasm got taken advantage of. So nationalizing something, I mean, you really think, I'm personally not going to jump aboard a ship navigated by a Nick Fuentes or any other internet, solely internet personality. It's just, we've seen it happen over what, the last 20 years almost, where there is tons and tons of enthusiasm on the right, but we end up being led by people who have their own personal agendas, whether it's earning an income off the backs of Americans or gaining fame because that's their thing. It's just, it's too, there's too much room for error again. The reason why so many people put their faith in Trump, well, personally, again, I already knew of Trump from reading his books post college. That was the Art of the Deal was the first book I read post college. I was burnt out from all the reading I did in school. I needed a break, and then it may have been during the first Apprentice season when I picked up that book. I'm not sure, but I read all of them. I read his follow-up books to The Art of the Deal. So in San Francisco, I had the opportunity to meet him, but it's that kind of thing where it's like a book signing event, and you know, it's that's not really meeting someone. That's, I don't know what you call it, but it's not really meeting, right? And so I knew of Trump from all of the business stuff that he did. I know, so when he ran for president, you know, and our politicians were letting us down, like Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, I was like, you know what, maybe Trump could work. And keep in mind, in California, the ones actively participating in the Republican groups and the conventions and the monthly lunches, these are people who rejected the possibility of a businessman ever running. So like Trump was right there on the horizon. This is before 2014 or whatever. And there were California Republicans who probably didn't vote for him just because they want their politicians, they don't want businessmen. And so I don't know how they reacted to all of that. But Trump is real. He has a resume of creating jobs. He's donated to several charities. There's an ice rink in New York that he basically finances, or he used to finance. He brought it back to life. He was a lot of the stuff that he did was for New York City, to revitalize it, to make it beautiful, to obviously tourism because it helps his real estate. But I mean, is that bad? Is that bad to revitalize an area that helps the people who live there and helps your wallet? I'm not sure. But Trump was different. And there is no other Trump. And that's why when some of y'all criticize Trump, I'm like, yeah, you've never created jobs. You've never donated on Trump's scale. So I'm not sure if I value your criticism of him. And then to me, it comes off as, oh, this is just somebody who's trying to garner attention for themselves for whatever they're peddling at the time. So, okay, I understand that some people want to tone down the individualism, but I think we need to figure out the leadership before that happens. And enthusiastic, patriotic Americans have been burned too many times in the last 20 years. So that's why I personally feel like what Scott Presler's doing, and then really fleshing out these Benjamin Franklin groups is our best hope. It's definitely going to help with preventing voter fraud. If your Benjamin Franklin group votes together, then you know that's at least 30 votes in one direction or the other. So it starts preventing voter fraud differently, right? That's why I'm going to tell you guys. So all these arenas, these sports arenas that ended up being voting places was totally sketchy. I mean, because we know who runs these teams. It's not Americans. At least Americans don't run the Tampa Dodgers. So, but it doesn't matter right now because Democrats have such a stronghold in LA anyway. So Dodger Stadium being a voting site, to me, I was like, okay, what's not going to make a big difference? As opposed to Milwaukee, where that was shady, right? Milwaukee has Jewish influence. On top of that, there's the Hank Aaron stuff. So there's African stuff going on there too, but that was shady, right? They need to put those kinds of things together. And that's going to be a challenge. That's definitely going to be a challenge with these sketchy professional sports related voting sites. So we need to tread lightly on that. But so we'll see. I mean, obviously we've got some time. I feel like I definitely feel that I have a sense of urgency. So we'll see how everything pans out. We'll even see how long we can keep talking like this online. That's why we've got to have offline stuff going on, and a lot of stuff to think about. Hopefully you'll pull something that interests you. So tomorrow we'll get into the more the physical altercation, or the physical consequences of these rebellious colonists, and England trying to trying to pay off its debt. And I'll have more of these Declaration of Independence signature information outlined, and we can go from there. So today's Wednesday, right? Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope you enjoy it. We'll see. I mean, at the same time, all we can do is wait. So, thank you again if you made it this far. Totally appreciate it. Remember, keep an eye on your health. Super important. We don't know where any of this is going to end up. What else? Read a book. If you haven't read Trump's books, start there. I will talk a little bit about why I recommend Rich Dad Poor Dad, given that I'm anti-finance. Okay, so something's happening. Okay, so I need to close out anyway. All right. So, again, if you made it this far, thank you very much. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. See you back here tomorrow as close to 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time as possible. We're still talking about American history, the parallels between Okay. Sorry, I've got some stuff happening. Probably a sign that I need to wrap up. So, see you guys tomorrow, as close to 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time as possible. Thank you very much.